Zira's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the cold, dimly lit room. The air smelled of decay, and the ground beneath her feet was cold metal. She had never been in a place like this before. Her people had always been seen as weak, so her capture and sale were not surprising to her. It was a fact of life, something that happened to many of her kind. But this felt different. There was something wrong, something that made her skin crawl. She could hear the murmurs of the alien traders nearby, their voices low as they haggled over her price. Zira knew she was worthless to them. Her skin was a dull shade, her eyes a muted color, and she had no special abilities like some of the other species in the galaxy. She was just another slave to be sold, another piece of property for the highest bidder. The trader who held her in his grasp was a large, brutish alien with thick green skin and tusks that curled around his lower jaw. His name was Rarick, and he had been the one to catch her. She had tried to run, to escape, but it had been pointless. She was too slow, too weak, and he had caught her easily. "The human buyer is coming," Rarick growled, his voice full of irritation. "I'll get at least a handful of rotten fruit for you. It's the best I can do." Zira's heart sank. Rotten fruit? She had heard of the black market before, but never like this. She had heard of valuable items being traded, rare, minerals, weapons, even living creatures of great power, but this was different. She had always been taught that her people were weak and unimportant. But being sold for something as worthless as rotten fruit made her feel small, like nothing. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. A man walked into the room, his steps confident but cautious. Zira barely looked at him at first, her gaze dropping to the cold floor as she fought to control her emotions. She didn't want to show fear, not when she had nothing left to lose. The man stopped in front of her. He was human, young, with short dark hair and sharp blue eyes. His clothes were simple dark trousers and a long coat that looked a bit out of place in the gritty industrial environment. Zira expected him to be just like the other, someone who would see her as just another piece of property, to be bought and sold without a second thought. But then something strange happened. Instead of inspecting her like a piece of meat or a mere object to be traded, he looked at her with something else in his eyes, something she hadn't seen in anyone else's gaze before. There was no pity, no disgust, just curiosity. "You're not worth much, are you?" Rarick said with a harsh laugh, not bothering to hide his disdain. "But she'd do the job. I'll take a handful of rotten fruit in exchange for her. Can't get much more useless than that." The human didn't react right away. He simply stared at Zira for a long moment, his eyes scanning her face. His expression was unreadable. For a moment, Zira wondered if she had made a mistake, if she had imagined the brief flicker of something in his gaze. Finally, the human spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I'll give you more than that," he said. Zira blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "More?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rarick snorted. "What are you talking about? You heard me, she's worth nothing?" "A handful of rotten fruit, that's it. She's weak, useless." The human shook his head. "You're wrong," he said softly, still focused on Zira. "She's worth more than that." Rarick was growing impatient. "No, she's not. No one wants her. You can't even sell her to a proper buyer." His tone was harsh, dismissive. But the human didn't back down. He pulled a small, thin device from his pocket and waved it in front of Rarick's face. The device beeped, and a series of numbers flashed on its screen. Rarick squinted at the display, his face a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What are you doing?" Rarick demanded. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I'm paying you more than you've ever gotten for her," the human replied. "I'll take her. All of her." There was a long silence. Zira's heart raced. No one had ever cared enough to pay more than the bare minimum for her people. She had never known anyone who would risk anything to see her free. The traders didn't care. They saw her as a means to an end, something to be used and discarded when it no longer served their purpose. But this human, he was different. Why would he care? The deal was done quickly, and before Zira knew it, she was no longer under the control of the alien traders. The human stood beside her, and though his eyes were focused on the traders, there was something calm in the way he held himself. "Come with me," he said gently, offering his hand. Zira hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But something in his gaze made her feel a strange sense of trust. She took a deep breath and placed her hand in his, her fingers brushing his palm. The human didn't speak much as they left the black market behind, walking through dark, narrow hallways toward the exit. Zira's mind was spinning. What was going on? Why had he helped her? She was nothing special. She wasn't powerful. She wasn't important. She was just a slave. A weak alien who had been sold for rotten fruit. But for the first time in her life, someone had seen her as something more. Zira's mind raced as she followed the human who had just bought her from the black market. She didn't know his name yet, but there was something about him. His actions, the way he spoke, and the way he looked at her. It all felt ... different. She wasn't used to being treated like this, especially after everything she had been through. She had lived most of her life as an object, something to be used and discarded. But this human... He saw something in her that no one had ever bothered to look for. They walked through the narrow corridors of the dark. Cold station, the sounds of the bustling black market growing fainter as they made their way toward the exit. Zero kept her head down, unsure of what to do. She wasn't used to freedom, two choices. Everything had always been decided for her until now. The human led her to a small shuttle parked just outside the market. The shuttle was sleek, quiet, and efficient-looking, nothing extravagant, but it seemed to hum with power beneath its simple exterior. Zira hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, unsure of where she was being taken. Her past experiences told her to be cautious. No one ever did something for free, and this man's kindness seemed almost too good to be true. As she sat in the seat opposite him, the human finally spoke. "My name's John," he said, offering her a small smile. "I didn't catch your name," Zira blinked, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't used her real name in a long time, not since she was first captured. Her captors always called her property, never by any other name. "Zira," she finally whispered. Her voice sounded weak, uncertain. She was still in shock, still trying to process everything that had just happened. "Zira," John repeated softly, as if tasting the name on his tongue. "Nice to meet you." He didn't sound like he was just saying it out of politeness. There was a sincerity to his voice, a warmth she hadn't heard in anyone else's words. "I know this is all a lot to take in," John continued, his voice calm and steady as the shuttle lifted off from the market. "But I'm not like those traders. I didn't buy you to sell you again. I bought you because I believe you're worth more than what they gave you." Zara's eyes widened at his words. "Worth more?" she repeated, almost laughing. "Just a slave, a useless alien? I've been sold like this my whole life. No one ever cared about what I was worth." John's expression softened as he looked at her. "You're wrong, Zira. You're more than just a slave. You're more than what they told you. You're definitely not useless." Zira turned, her gaze to the window, watching as the stars blurred by. She didn't know what to think. She had never been told that she had value. It was hard to believe, especially after being treated like an object for so long. She had spent years thinking of herself as nothing more than property, just one among many who were bought and sold across the galaxy. But John wasn't like the others. He wasn't treating her like a thing. He was treating her like a person. "Why?" Zira asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why did you buy me? What do you want with me?" John sighed, glancing over at her. "It's not about what I want from you, Zira. It's about what you can have, what you deserve. I work with an organization that believes all beings, no matter their species, deserve respect. I bought you because I believe you have a future, something far better than being sold for rotten fruit on the black market." Zira shook her head. In disbelief? She didn't understand. Why would anyone care about her? She had no special abilities, no remarkable skills. She was just a regular alien from a weak species. John must have sensed her confusion because he continued. "Not just any alien, Zira. I've seen others like you before, alien races who were once seen as weak or insignificant, but they turned out to be some of the most valuable beings in the galaxy. You, too, have something powerful inside you. You just need the chance to discover it." The words hung in the air, and Zira could feel them settle in her chest like a heavy weight. She had always been told that her people were nothing, that they were born to serve or be used by others. No one had ever told her she had a purpose beyond that. "You're saying I have power?" she asked, still unsure if she believed it. "I'm saying you have potential," John replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You have a strength that no one has bothered to see, and that's why I'm here. I want to help you find it." Remained silent, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always felt so small, so powerless. But now, for the first time, someone believed in her. The thought was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Could she really be more than just a slave? Could she have a future beyond being bought and sold? The shuttle's engines hummed softly as they traveled through space. Zira couldn't help but wonder what awaited her on the other side. She didn't know if she was ready for what was to come, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a choice. She had someone who saw her, who believed in her, and that made all the difference. "I don't know if I can do this," Zira whispered, her voice barely audible. John turned to her, his expression sincere. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way." Zira's eyes filled with uncertainty, but there was also a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Zira sat in the small room of the shuttle, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She wasn't used to being treated like this, like she was valuable. Every part of her life until now had taught her that she was nothing more than a piece of property. The human, John, seemed to think differently. But she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The shuttle glided smoothly through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming quietly. Zira glanced out the small window, her eyes tracing the stars. That seemed so far away. Felt strange, too strange, being free. She had spent years in cages, shackles, and prisons, but now she was moving through space with someone who believed in her. But what did that really mean? Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? As if reading her mind, John spoke. "We're almost there. Just a few more hours, Zira. I know this is a lot for you to take in. I just want you to know that you're safe with me. You're not a slave anymore." Zira turned to him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Safe," she repeated softly. "How? Can I be safe? I've never been safe in my life. I've always been someone else's possession." John didn't look at her as he spoke, his focus on the controls of the shuttle. "I know it's hard to believe, but what I'm offering you is real. You can choose what you want to do now. No more being sold, no more being traded. You get to decide your own future." The words sank into her, but they didn't sit right. How could she possibly have a future? Her life had always been about surviving, about escaping one cage only, to end up in another. There was nothing but the present, the harsh, cold present. "I don't know how to do that," Zira whispered, her voice small. "I don't know how to live like that." And John's gaze softened as he looked at her for a moment, his face kind. "But serious? That's why we're going to help you. We have a place where you can learn, where you can discover what you're really capable of." "Where?" Zira asked. Her curiosity piqued despite herself. "A safe place," John replied. "It's a sanctuary for people like you. We help those who've been oppressed, those who've been taken advantage of. We believe that every being, no matter where they come from, has something to offer." Zira was silent for a moment, letting his words settle in her mind. Could it really be that simple? Could she really live a life where she wasn't just trying to survive? She had spent so long in fear, in silence, that the idea of something different seemed almost impossible as they continued their journey. Zira tried to focus on the present moment, to keep her mind from spiraling into uncertainty. The thought of being free was almost overwhelming, but there was also a small part of her buried deep inside that longed for something more than what she had always known. The shuttle's steady hum soon turned to the soft whirring of the landing engines. As they descended toward their destination, Zira's stomach tightened as she watched the strange, lush landscape below. It was a stark contrast to the dark, cold metal of the markets and stations she had grown accustomed to. The planet below was green and full of life, looked like a place where dreams could grow, and Zira wondered if that could be true for her. As the shuttle touched down, John turned to her. This is it, Zira. Welcome to the sanctuary. Zira hesitated before stepping out, her feet touching the soft ground. She looked around, taking in the peaceful surrounding stalled trees, flowing rivers, and a sky that seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like a dream, and yet it was real. A few people were already waiting for them as they exited the shuttle. They were a mix of different species, some humanoid, others more exotic in appearance, but they all seemed to have the same peaceful energy. Zira's heart pounded in her chest as she noticed how they watched her, their eyes filled with kindness, but also curiosity. "Welcome, Zira," one of the women, an alien with pale green skin, said with a smile. "We're so glad you're here." Zira didn't know how to respond. She had never been welcomed like this before. It was hard to believe that these strangers could care about her. She had always been taught to distrust kindness, to see it as a weakness, a trick. But now in this moment, she wasn't so sure. Could these people be different? "This is Mara," John said, introducing the green-skinned woman. "She's one of the leaders here. She'll help you get settled." Zira nodded stiffly, still unsure of what to say. She glanced at Mara, who seemed to understand her hesitation. "Take your time," Mara said gently. "We're here to help you. You don't have to rush into anything. Just breathe and know that you're safe now." Exhaled slowly, her breath shaky. The weight of everything she had been through, everything she had known, felt like it was too much to carry. But something inside her, a small spark of hope, began to stir. She had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she might have a choice. As Mara led her toward the sanctuary's main building, Zira glanced back at the shuttle, where John was standing. He was watching her with that same calm, trusting expression, and for a brief moment, Zira allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future beyond survival. She wasn't sure how to take that first step, but with John's help and the support of these strangers, maybe she could begin to learn how to live. Zira's first few days at the sanctuary felt like a blur. She spent most of her time in a small, quiet room where soft light filtered through the windows. The people here were kind, but Zira didn't know how to interact with them. She had spent so long isolated from others that the idea of trusting people, truly trusting them, was terrifying. John checked in on her regularly, always gentle in his questions, giving her space when she needed it. He told her the others at the sanctuary would help her find her way, that she didn't have to rush into anything. It was the first time in Zira's life that she didn't feel like she had to keep running or hiding. Despite the kindness around her, Zira struggled to shake the feeling that she didn't belong. The sanctuary was peaceful, too peaceful. And the people here weren't like the traitors or the criminals she had grown up with. They weren't interested in using her, and that felt strange. One morning, after a restless night of sleep, Zira wandered through the sanctuary's grounds. The sun had just risen, casting a warm golden light across the fields. It was quiet, except for the soft chirping of alien birds in the distance. Zira stopped near a garden, feeling the cool breeze on her skin. It was strange. He'd never experienced anything like this before. A voice broke through her thoughts. "Zira." It was John. She turned to find him standing behind her, a concerned look on his face. "Are you all right?" Zira hesitated, unsure how to answer. She felt a weight in her chest, a tightness she couldn't explain. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she finally said, gesturing to the peaceful surroundings. "This place. It's nothing like what I'm used to. I feel like I don't belong here." John took a step closer, his expression softening. "I know it's hard. It's going to take time. This place is for people like you, Zira. People who've been treated badly. You have a chance to be something different here." Zira's eyes dropped to the ground. "I've always been taught I'm nothing more than a slave. I don't know how to live any other way. I don't know how to be ... free." John's voice was gentle but firm. "You don't have to be the person they made you believe you are. You're more than that." Zira looked up at him, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She had heard these words before, but they had never meant anything. Now, everyone who had ever said them had used them as lies or empty promises. But Johnny wasn't like the others. She could see it in his eyes. He truly believed in her. For a moment she let herself feel the weight of his words. Maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what she had been told. John smiled softly. "Come with me. There's someone I want you to meet." Zira followed him through the garden and into a large building at the center of the sanctuary. Inside, the air smelled of fresh plants, and the walls were lined with bookshelves. It was unlike any place she had ever seen, calm, warm, and full of life. At the back of the room, an older woman was sitting at a desk, writing something on a piece of paper. Her skin was a deep purple, her eyes a sharp silver. Looked up when they entered and smiled warmly. "This is Mara," John said, introducing her. "She's one of the leaders here." Mara stood up and walked over to Zira. "Welcome, Zira," she said in a kind voice. "I've heard so much about you. I'm glad you're here." Zira nodded, feeling suddenly shy. "Thank you." Mara motioned for Zira to sit at a nearby table. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want to tell you something important. You're not here just by accident. You're here because you're special." Zira blinked in surprise. "Special?" she repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "I don't think I'm special. I've spent my whole life being told I'm worthless." Mara smiled softly. "I know what it's like to feel that way. I was once in your place, Zira. I was an outcast, someone no one believed in. But I learned something along the way. Sometimes, the very thing that makes you feel weak is the thing that makes you strong." Zira's brow furrowed as she listened. "What do you mean?" Mara leaned forward, her voice steady. "You come from a powerful race, Zira. A race that was nearly wiped out because others feared your strength. Your people were once known for their abilities that were so great they scared the powerful empires of the galaxy." Zira's heart raced as she processed her words. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "I don't have any abilities. I've never been anything special." John stepped forward, his face serious. "Your abilities are inside you, Zira. You just don't know how to use them yet. They've been hidden and buried deep inside you. But they're there, and when the time comes, they'll awaken." Zira's mind spun with confusion. She had always been told that her people were weak, that they were nothing. She had been sold for rotten fruit, treated like dirt. The idea that she could have real powers, felt impossible. Mara nodded, as if she had read Zira's thoughts. "You're not just some ordinary being, Zira. You have the potential to change the future, not just for your people, but for the entire galaxy. You are a descendant of a lost race, a race that was believed to be extinct." Zira looked between John and Mara, her heart pounding. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How can this be true? How can I be ... special?" Mara stood up and placed a hand on Zira's shoulder. "You don't have to understand it all right now. But I promise you, Zira, you are capable of far more than you've ever been told. You just need to believe it yourself." Zira sat quietly, trying to process everything she had just heard. For the first time in her life, someone was telling her that she wasn't broken, that she wasn't worthless. It was a lot to take in, but a small spark of hope began to grow inside her. She wasn't sure what the future held. But maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that she was more than just a slave. She could start to believe in herself. The days passed quickly at the sanctuary. Zira spent her time learning, growing, and adjusting to a new life. At first, everything had seemed so overwhelming. The idea that she could be more than just a slave, that she had a purpose beyond survival. It was hard to accept. But with each passing day, she began to understand that maybe, just maybe, there was something more to her story. Zira spent hours with Mara, learning about her people's history, their strengths, and their abilities. The more she learned, the more she realized how little she knew about herself. Her people had once been feared across the galaxy not for their power to destroy, but for their knowledge, their wisdom, and their ability to heal and protect. They were not weak, as she had always been told. They were once one of the most respected races in the universe. As Zira's understanding deepened, so did her sense of purpose. The knowledge inside her was starting to stir, like a long-forgotten memory that was slowly coming back to life. She didn't know how to unlock it fully yet, but she could feel it, a power deep within her that had been hidden for so long. One evening, after a long day of training, Zira sat outside the sanctuary, gazing at the setting sun. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the peaceful beauty of the moment, contrasting sharply with the chaos she had left behind. She could hear the faint sounds of birds in the distance and the soft rustling of the trees in the breeze. It was peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. John approached her, sitting down beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just sitting quietly beside her, sharing the moment. Zira could feel the weight of the day slowly lifting off her shoulders. "How are you feeling?" John finally asked, his voice gentle. Zira sighed, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Wow. It's strange. I've never felt this at peace before. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not fully myself yet. Like there's something inside me waiting to be unlocked." John nodded, understanding. "You're getting there, Zira. It's not going to happen overnight, but you're making progress. You're learning who you are and what you're capable of, and the people here, they believe in you. I believe in you." Zira turned to look at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if I'm not what you think I am?" "If I can't do what you say I can," John smiled softly, his eyes warm with reassurance. "You don't have to be perfect, Zira. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just need to keep moving forward, step by step, and you're doing that. You're already stronger than you think." Zira nodded slowly, trying to absorb his words. She wasn't sure if she could truly be the person John and Mara believed her to be. But she was beginning to understand that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, about discovering what she was capable of. As the days went on, Zira grew more confident. She continued her training, learning to control her abilities, to tap into the deep well of strength that lay hidden within her. At times it felt like she was pushing against a wall, but she refused to give up. She had been told all her life that she was nothing, that she had no value. But now, she was learning the truth. She was more than just a slave. She was powerful. One day, Mara called Zira to her office. When Zira entered, she found Mara sitting at her desk, looking over a map of the galaxy. The older woman looked up and smiled. "Zira," Mara said, "I think it's time for you to take the next step." Zira's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tense. "You've learned so much here," Mara said, "and now it's time for you to use that knowledge. There's a group of your people who are still enslaved by the traitors. They're being held on a distant planet, far from here. We've learned where they are, and we have a plan to free them." Zira's heart pounded in her chest. The idea of rescuing her people, of bringing them back to safety, filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. She had never imagined that she could lead such a mission. But now the idea of helping her people, of showing them that they could be free, felt like the right thing to do. "I can't do this alone," Zira said, her voice soft. "I don't know how to lead them. I don't even know if I can, really." "Help." Mara stood up and walked over to her. "You've already shown that you have the strength to do this, Zira. You've learned how to use your abilities. You've discovered what you're capable of. You're not alone. You have us. You have the sanctuary. We'll be with you every step of the way." Zira took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She was scared, but she was also determined. This was her chance to make a difference, not just for herself, but for her people. She couldn't keep running from her past. She had to face it head on and show the galaxy that her people were not weak. They were not to be underestimated. "All right," Zira said, her voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll help them." Mara smiled. "I knew you would. You ready, Zira?" And with that, Zira's journey to reclaim her people began. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was walking the path she was meant to be on. She was no longer just a slave. She was a leader, a warrior, and a symbol of hope for her people. Zira stood at the edge of the ship, her eyes fixed on the planet below. It was a place she had never imagined she would return to. The distant world was home to the slave market where her people had been sold for generations. place of sorrow, pain, and endless suffering. Yet now she was here for a different reason, one of hope. The mission to rescue her people had been weeks in the making. Zira had trained, studied, and prepared herself for this moment. She was no longer the frightened aliens sold for rotten fruit. She was a leader, a fighter, and a symbol of freedom for those who had been enslaved. Beside her stood John, his expression serious as he watched the planet draw nearer. He had been with her every step of the way, offering his support and guidance. She could see the pride in his eyes, but also the concern. He knew the dangers they would face. "Are you ready?" John asked, his voice steady. Zira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "I have to be," she replied, her voice firm. "I can't let my people suffer any longer." John nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've come a long way, Zira. I believe in you." Zira turned to look at him, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you, John. You've helped me believe in myself." He smiled at her. "Now it's time for you to show everyone else what you're capable of." As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, Zira's thoughts raced. She had spent her entire life as a slave, believing she was nothing. But now, she was about to lead a rebellion. She had been told her people were weak, that they had no place in the galaxy. But she knew the truth now. Her people were strong. They were capable of far more than anyone had ever given them credit for. The ship landed on a rocky plain just outside the prison camp where her people were being held. The area was surrounded by high walls, heavily guarded by alien soldiers. Zero could see the faint outlines of prisoners in the distance, their heads bowed in despair. She clenched her fists, surge of anger rising within her. Her people deserved so much more than this. She would make sure they were free, no matter the cost. "Let's move," John said, his voice low and urgent. "We don't have much time." Zira nodded and followed him as they made their way toward the camp. The ground beneath their feet was rough, and the air was thick with tension. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's stronghold as they approached the gates. Zira could hear the sound of guards' voices, their laughter echoing through the compound. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that the people they had enslaved were about to rise up and reclaim their freedom. Zira motioned for the others to be quiet. As they reached the edge of the camp, she could see the guards standing at their posts, unaware of the approaching danger. Zira's heart raced as she prepared for what was to come. The plan was simple: get inside, free the prisoners, and take control of the camp. But nothing was ever that easy. "On my signal," John whispered, his hand resting on his weapon, "we move in." Zero took one last look at the prisoners in the distance. They were her people, her family, and she couldn't leave them behind. She raised her hand, giving the signal. In an instant they were moving. The first guard fell before he even knew what hit him, his body crumpling to the ground. Heart pounded as she ran, her legs carrying her faster than she had ever moved before. She was no longer the frightened alien slave. She was the leader of a rebellion, and this was her moment. The sound of blaster fire rang out, and chaos erupted. Guards shouted in confusion as they tried to react, but Zira and her team were faster. Every step they took brought them closer to the prisoners, closer to freedom. Zira's eyes scanned the area, searching for the gate that would lead her to her people. There, in the distance, she saw at a tall metal gate, heavily guarded by 2 soldiers. She knew this was where they would make their stand. "Take them out," Zira shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. She didn't hesitate. This was her fight, and she wasn't going to back down. The soldiers fell quickly, but not without a fight. Zira's heart raced as she ducked behind cover, narrowly avoiding a blaster shot. She could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins. This was what she had been training for. This was what she was meant to do. With a final push, Zira and her team reached the gate. John worked quickly, disabling the lock, and with one powerful shove, the gate swung open. The sound of the gate opening was the signal for the prisoners. They rushed forward, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some of them stumbled as they ran, unsure if this was truly happening. Zira stepped forward, her heart swelling with emotion. "You're free," she said, her voice strong. "No one owns you anymore. You're free to live the life you deserve." Tears filled her eyes as the prisoners cheered, their voices rising in unison. For the first time in her life, Zira felt the weight of everything she had been through lift off her shoulders. She had done it. She had freed her people, but the battle wasn't over. As Zira turned to see the soldiers regrouping, she knew they would fight to the bitter end. They wouldn't give up easily, but neither would she. With a newfound strength, Zira raised her weapon, ready to lead her people into the final battle. This was her moment. She was no longer a slave. She was a warrior, a leader, the one who would change the course of history. The galaxy would never see her people as weak again.